Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for lowpost.com, and I'm back again with a brand new tutorial series, this time focusing on Daly's workflow inside of Assimilate Scratch. Now, who is this course for? Well, whether you're new to Scratch and you want to start learning about Daly's workflows, or whether you're a seasoned professional with Scratch, this course is designed to give you everything you need to know from start to finish, including some great tips and tricks for you advanced users out there to make sure your Daly's workflow is locked in, ready to go, and right every time. Now, we're going to cover 7 lessons throughout this course, starting with a general overview in this tutorial, then following up lesson 2 with software and project setup, loading footage in the media browser, audio sync and QC, color and lookup tables, rendering, and metadata export and recording. But as I said, in this lesson, we're going to start with a general overview. And as you can see, we are on the main project selection window and the splash screen for Scratch 9.1. Now, one thing that I always like to do when I'm starting out a new course is to talk specifically about this splash screen. Now, you might be thinking, who cares? What difference does a splash screen make? Well, in Scratch, it actually makes a big difference, especially if you run into issues when working and you need to reach out to support for assistance. If you click anywhere in the splash screen, you will be brought to the system information window, which will give you important information like the software version that you're running, in our case, version 9.1, the OS and the drivers. I am on a Mac. The concepts and things that I'm going to show you in here will work exactly the same whether you're on Mac or on Windows, the graphics card information, the memory installed, and last but certainly not least, all the system information that the team will need to get you back up and running as quickly as possible. Now, I've already created a project for us to work with called, appropriately enough, Daly's Course Lesson 1, Introduction. If you need to get in and to create your own project, you can simply click on New. I'm going to give this project a name, appropriately enough, Test Project. And once I say create, everything that is currently grayed out will now be available for me to get in and set so that we can get ourselves up and running. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that with the default image format settings, you'll see right now we're set to be a 1080 2398 frame per second project. Once I set this, don't worry if you make a mistake or need to change something, we can always change this from within the project, so you're not locked into whatever you set here. So keep that in mind as you are working. Now, I'm just simply going to say OK to create that project, but let's select our Daly's Course Lesson 1. I'm going to say Enter Project, and we are now greeted by the Construct window. Now, you'll notice that we only have 2 windows available to us right now, the Construct window and the Player. And we're going to talk about both of those, but before we do that, I actually want to talk about tool sets. Now, what exactly is a tool set? Well, if you're coming from an application like Avid Media Composer, like Adobe Premiere Pro, you are familiar with workspaces. Workspaces give you the ability to get in and to set up specific tools for specific tasks. For example, if you're going to be doing effects work, it will give you all of the tools that you need to get your effects work done. If you're going to be doing audio mixing, again, all of the audio tools at your disposal. Now, tool sets work similar inside of Scratch. What a tool set is going to do is it's going to strip down the application to only give you the tools that you need for that specific task. So by default, you'll see here that we're looking at the player/review toolset. Now, if we're only doing review and approval on Scratch, again, if we happen to be on set, we have a producer, director of photography, or anybody else that wants to see this right away, we only really need access to being able to get footage in and show footage. Okay, now there's a few other bells and whistles like applying technical LUTs to your footage that we're going to talk about in upcoming lessons. Now, for the purpose of this lesson, I've actually already added a technical LUT to this footage, and I'll show it to you in just a second. Now, by default, with the player/review toolset, we only have access to 2 panels, the Construct window and the Player. Now, to navigate through our different panels, we can use the F keys on the keyboard. Now, in this case, we are in the Construct window. If I wanted to switch to the Player window, I could simply hit F2, and we can now see that clip that we had up and selected here in the Construct window. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to switch to the Daly/CDL toolset. And you'll now see that we have 4 panels, Construct, Edit, Color Effects, and Render, that we can again toggle through with F1, F2, F3, and F4. Now, since we're talking about shortcuts, there's another shortcut that I want to throw out there, probably the most common shortcut that you're going to use when working in Scratch. I'm just going to hide my right panel here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Alt or Option down on the keyboard. You'll notice as soon as I do that, my little crosshairs changes, and you'll see now that if I zoom in and zoom out, we can use this to toggle a zoom in on anywhere that we want to zoom in on the screen. Okay, what we can also do is we can use the space bar to pan. Okay, so Option or Alt to zoom, space bar to pan, and what I'm going to do at any time, if I'd like to zoom back to fit the image to display, I can simply click on it like such, call up my panel on the right hand side, and we're right back to where we started. Now let's move on. Let's talk about the differences between the tool sets. Now the difference between our dailies workflow and our finish/full workflow, as you can see, more specifically in the color effects window, once we select it, it's going to give you all of the tools inside of Scratch for you to get in and to do all of your color grading, your adding LUTs, all kinds of things like that. So keep that in mind. Now, to be honest, it really doesn't matter which tool set you work with inside of your dailies workflow. I'll be predominantly working inside of the dailies tool set, but keep in mind that, to be honest, really the only one that you can't really use is the player/review, because you need a little bit more tools to do the work that you're going to need to do. Before we get rolling, I do want to talk just a little bit about the player. So I'm going to select the player/review tool set. We're going to head back to the construct window. A couple ways that we can call this clip up. We can, with it selected here, simply hit F2 to navigate to the player, or what I can do is simply just double click on the clip and that will open it in the player for us to take a look at. Now I'm going to hit the space bar here to play the clip. You'll see that we are at the end of the clip. We can simply take the time bar, drag it back to wherever we need it to go to, hit play.
Out on the apple, should I?
And there we go.
Starting? Yeah.
Now, one thing that I love about the player window, specifically if you happen to be working on set, is there's a lot of times that you're going to need to get footage in. You'll need to apply a technical LUT to it so that everybody can see what this is going to look like. I'm not going to say when it's finished, but more or less at its quote-unquote, base color reference. Okay. Now, this footage was log color space, so what I did is I applied a log to Rec 709 technical LUT to it. Now, you wouldn't know that it was there unless I told you. Or what you could do is simply toggle the grade on and off right here by simply clicking on it like such. Okay, you'll see there's log color space, there's Rec 709. Now, where this comes in very handy on set, the player specifically, is what you have the ability to do is to come in and to do a split screen. Now with the split screen, you'll see that we can take it, move it wherever we want it to go, rotate it however we want to rotate it, but more specifically, what it gives us the ability to do on either the left or the right side of the screen is to toggle that grade on and off. Now everybody on set can see what this looked like before, what it looks like after, and to be honest, the still frame is great, but it'd be even better if we could do this while Scratch was playing, which we totally have the ability to do.
Copy that.
Now, as far as audio goes and actually determining whether there's audio on this clip or attached to this clip, there's a couple ways we can do it. We can use our ear, which is what we're doing right now, and toggle on and off our sound right here. What we can also do is simply come back to the construct window. I'm just going to hit F1, and you'll see that there's audio attached to this clip because I can see the little audio icon right there. Now, what also makes this interesting is the fact that that icon is yellow. Now, if it's yellow, that indicates that's external audio. If it's white, it indicates that it's clip embedded audio. And if it's not there, well then of course that indicates that the clip is MOS. Now, there is another way that we can see if this clip has audio in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch tool sets. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch to the full and finish tool set. And I'm going to head to the edit module by hitting F2 on the keyboard. Right now we are taking a look at video, and what I'd like to do is to just turn off our split screen, and I'd like to actually see the audio. Once I click on the audio, what I can now do is stretch the screen right out. I can see exactly how many channels are attached to this clip, and what's important to keep in mind is that this audio that is attached to this clip is not the audio that was natively attached to this clip. It's not what was recorded out of the camera onto the actual clip itself. I actually attached this audio that was given to us from the audio engineer that was on set. Now, one quick thing that I do want to draw your attention to, we're going to talk a lot about metadata coming up, but I want to draw your attention over here to the left-hand side where you can see that information that was actually entered into this audio file on set has been transferred over to the audio file here, and you can see that our audio tracks are actually listed here as being mono, mono, Julie, Chado, Vince, and boom. So you can see that information entered on the set, metadata, is going to be transferred over with this audio file right into Scratch for us to reference. Now, the last way to figure out if there is audio is to come up to the audio window. Okay. Now what we have the ability to do, and I'm just going to come right back to here, is we can hit play. We can actually see a close-up of our audio waveforms. In this case, I'm listening to everything right now, but I can narrow this right down to whatever specific track that I want to work with. And what this window is also going to give us the ability to do is to sync wild audio that might not necessarily have timecode attached to it, so that we can make sure that that audio gets attached to whatever clip we need to have it attached to. So that when we create our dailies, the correct audio will be associated with that clip. But again, coming up in a future lesson. Now, sticking with the panels that we have at the top, or the tools that we have at the top, let's now close our audio window. Let's talk a little bit about scopes, because if we're talking about dailies, obviously the scopes are very important. To be honest, if you're an editor, scopes are exceptionally important as it is. And one thing that I love in Scratch, let me just pull the window right down here just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is just switch back to our dailies tool set here. Now you'll notice that in our dailies tool set, we still have that audio tool at our disposal. I'll just switch back to video so that we can lose those waveforms. And let's come right back up here to our scopes. Now by default, Scratch will show us our waveform and vector scope. And right down here, we have the ability to add even more tools like a full histogram, like such. We can turn off tools that we might not necessarily need, and even get in and add other tools like curves. Let me just close that up here, and even come into our settings to do things like update on play, like such. Okay, let me actually just switch back to the waveform here. Okay. And let's put our vector scope on as well. Perfect. Okay. Or we can only have it update when it's idle. Okay. We can have it at full resolution, half resolution. You see, you have a lot of options inside of your scopes. But again, like I said, it's not really user-friendly for me in this case when I'm demoing it, only because it's sitting directly over top of our footage. But you get the idea of how this is going to work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show it down here at half. So this way, it actually makes it a little bit easier for me to position it for us to see it. Okay. Now let me just turn the settings off, because this way I could actually position it right over here. A little bit small, but still not too bad. Okay. Now, one last thing that I do want to mention about the scopes before we move on, I'm just going to come into my settings here for 1 second, is that you do have the ability, if you don't want to see your scopes as luminance and you want to get in and see them as actual RGB, you can separate the red, green, and blue channels. This is especially helpful for DITs on set if you need to see if the red channel's clipping or if there's something going on with the blue channel. You can get in, split them up, see exactly what's going on from within the scope. Again, hit play, see everything in real time, and choose how you want to have things updated, whether you want to have them updated on the fly or when you pause. All right, let's close up our settings. We're going to close our scope, and let's move on and let's talk about a very, very cool feature in here. And I'm just going to close that. I'm going to come to the scene/take window. Now, what is this for? Well, obviously this is very important if you happen to be working on a film shoot. Obviously, all of the scenes in the film are going to be numbered 1 through however many scenes there happens to be, with however many takes there happens to be. You are going to be able to get in and either specifically assign a scene and take number to every shot, or what you could do is you could simply get in and assign the first one, and as you go through from the first shot to the next shot or to a previous shot, you can actually have Scratch get in and auto increment the next take based on the current take. So Scratch will do all of the legwork for you. You also have the ability to get in and mark circle takes. Now, what the heck is a circle take? Well, this is actually a very, very cool little feature that, to be honest, I didn't know much about. And once I read up a little bit on it, I really, really like it. A circle take is actually fairly self-explanatory. So in this scene, scene 160, we're going to have 6 takes, okay? But only take 3 is the one that we really like. It's the one that, when the script assistant was writing everything out, that was the one that they'd circled. They circled that take as saying it was the best one. So this is how you can get in and say, oh, okay, well, this take here is the circle take. It's the best take of all 6 takes. So this is the one that we're going to want to have the editor look at specifically first before they go in and look at any of the other takes. Now, as funny as it sounds, the best part about this feature is that you really shouldn't have to do anything except verify the metadata that's been input on the set by the audio engineer or audio technician. So again, like I said, you're going to be checking everything to make sure it's correct as opposed to entering all this information yourself. Now, all of this information is great and everything, but where is it actually being saved? Well, metadata is obviously the foundation of what we're doing here. Information is the key when we're sending our dailies from scratch to wherever they're going to be going to, Media Composer or wherever. So metadata, we want as much metadata attached to these clips as possible. This is why I like to segue from our scene/take window into metadata. Now, if you take a look over here on the right-hand side of the screen, right now we have our versions window up. Now, versions inside of Scratch are how we can get in and create different grades, different looks to our footage. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to switch to the full finish. I'm just going to come over to the color effects module or color effects panel. I'm just going to add a version in here. I'm going to select it. Let's just make a very minor primary or minor balance change here. Let's just add another version here. And let's come in. We'll just do the exact same thing here. I'm just going to reset that value. We'll just give this a little bit of a magenta look to it. Just increase the brightness just a little bit. There we go. And you'll see there's our different versions when we're doing our grading. However, versions is not what's important to us when we're talking about dailies. Metadata is. Well, if you take a look right down here at the bottom, you'll see that we have versions. But if you take a look a few tabs over, we have one called metadata. Now this is where I like to tie the scene/take information in with metadata. If you take a look right up at the very top of the metadata information, we have the name and real ID, which are probably the 2 most important pieces of metadata. But right after that, we have scene and we have take. Now you'll notice that if I come in and I update the scene information to be scene 155 and take 6, you'll notice that as I'm getting in and entering that information, let's actually make sure we call it take 6, it's immediately being updated in the metadata window. So as we get in and enter information like this, information that can be updated, it's going to be updated immediately in your metadata. So this window is exceptionally important for information. As much information as we can give the editorial staff is what we want to make sure is in this window. Even things like the circle take. You'll notice as soon as I toggle that on and off, it's appearing over here and disappearing as I turn it off. All right, I think that's a good place to leave off for this lesson. Before we do wrap things up though, I just want to give you a very brief introduction to the media browser. What I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to the construct window. I'm going to switch here. Now you'll notice that as I added those versions, they actually appear here in my slot with the different versions that we can pick and choose from. I'm just going to switch over to player/review for just 1 second, because when I switch over to that tool set, I do have the ability to import clips. However, I don't have the ability to manage any of those clips utilizing the media browser. Now, what type of management would I need to do to those clips? Well, let's switch back here to our dailies/CDL tool set. And as soon as I do, you'll notice the media browser appear over here on the right, where we can do things like view and batch update shot settings, and more specifically, metadata. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that, and you'll notice now that we have 6 tabs at our disposal: base, grade, files, audio, node, and metadata. So this is where we now have the ability to get in and to do things like add technical LUTs inside of the grade tab. We have the ability to sync audio right over here in the audio tab, as well as getting in and adding metadata information over here in the metadata window. Now we're going to talk a lot more about the media browser, again, as you know, in an upcoming lesson, but I just wanted to give you a very basic look at it so that you know it's there. So when we get into it in the next lesson, you'll have a bit of familiarity with it. All right, now as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowpost.com/forums. And if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com.